And the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Madam Secretary, if you could please call roll. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Black.
Present.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblywoman Ellison. Assemblyman Ellison.
Here.
Forgive me. Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas. Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Flores.
Present. Thank you, Madam Secretary. All members are present. For those of you following virtually, I wanted to thank you for joining our meeting this morning. Members, thank you for all being logged in, prompt, and ready to go and get this day going. For those of you following virtually, I want to remind you, because we are in unprecedented times, sometimes you'll see a lot of us looking down or to the left or to the right, and it may give the appearance that we're not paying attention to the meeting or the monitor itself. That's just because some of us have a weird setup. Some of us have printed documents that we're looking down at. Others have different monitors that they're looking at. So I just want you to be aware that if you may see us looking in different directions or down, we're still paying attention. It's just that it's kind of whatever structure we have in our offices. I want to remind all the members to please make sure that you consistently mute yourself whenever you're not participating or speaking or asking a question. We do have a chat set up. If you do have a question, please make sure that you send me a message or to Vice Chair so that we can make sure that you get an opportunity to ask questions. This morning, we're going to follow the agenda in the order it appears. For those of you who haven't had an opportunity virtually to see the agenda, we have 3 presentations scheduled for today. We will not be hearing any bills. The first presentation is from the Division of Human Resource Management, Department of Administration. The second is from Purchasing Division, and the last is from the State Public Works Division. Afterwards, we'll go into public comment, and then we'll adjourn. That's how we intend to proceed for today. And I ask that everybody be very patient, as a lot of us are new to this technology, and we want to make sure that we're very patient with broadcasting. We're doing this simultaneously for a lot of different meetings, and we're grateful to them and our staff. With that, broadcasting, if we could please go to Division of Human Resource Management, Department of Administration presentation. And I believe we have 2 folk who will be presenting for today.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Peter Long, Administrator of the Division of Human Resource Management within the Department of Administration. I appreciate the opportunity today to speak in front of your committee and give an overview of our agency. I have provided a PowerPoint presentation. My intent is not to do death by PowerPoint, but to just provide you this information to look at your leisure and give an overview of each slide. So slide 2 is our org chart and notes the various sections within DHRM, and we have approximately 77 allocated positions. They're not all filled at this time, but that's what we're budgeted. Moving on to slide 3. The divisions within, or the sections within the Division of Human Resource Management include equal employment opportunity, employee and management services, central payroll and employee records, compensation classification and recruitment, agency human resource services, labor relations unit, and Office of Employee Development. The Equal Employment Opportunity Office has several roles and missions: provide advice and guidance to state agencies about EEO matters, recommend and assist with the implementation of policies to create and maintain a work environment free of harassment and discrimination, and conduct community outreach to market the state of Nevada as the employer of choice in support of the state's affirmative action initiatives. We provide oversight for the state's affirmative action plan and reports. develop and deliver online during today's pandemic protocols, anti-discrimination and sexual harassment prevention training for employees, supervisors, and managers, manage the discrimination and harassment complaints through our sexual harassment discrimination unit, and develop and administer the state mediation program. On the next slide, the Sexual Harassment Discrimination Investigation Unit was established July 1st of 2003 by Governor Gwynn. And that was established to an impartial, consistent, and independent investigative process to evaluate allegations contained in a complaint of harassment or discrimination. The SHDIU's mission is to conduct prompt, independent investigations of complaints of sexual harassment and discrimination as defined by state and federal law in order to protect the interests of the state, protect employees from unlawful discrimination and harassment, and reduce costs associated with settlements and court decisions against the state. The SHDIU is managed by the EEO office and is part of the division. Has 1 supervisory compliance investigator and 3 compliance investigator 2s, and those positions are located in Carson City and Las Vegas to assist all state employees. The next slide is a quick breakdown of the types of complaints we receive and the percentages. I won't go into each one, but you can see that the majority are sexual harassment and racial discriminations with smaller breakdowns among the rest. I would point out that it's not on the slide, but in fiscal year 19, the number of complaints the division received were 155. Of those, 48 rose to the level of requiring an investigation. And of those 48, 23 had findings that some type of infraction had occurred. In fiscal year 20, 159 complaints were received, 25 were investigated, and 17 had findings. And you might ask why we don't investigate every complaint received. We do a review and make sure that the complaint fits within the areas that we're responsible for. Sometimes it's just an employee who doesn't like their supervisor, or it may be a hostile work environment, but not to the level of a Title VII complaint. So that's the explanation of complaints versus investigations. We also have a mediation program within the division, and this is to mediate between employees and their supervisors and managers, hopefully before it rises to a grievance level. And we see this as a win-win for both employees and management. A lot of times employees just want the opportunity to be heard, and they don't feel that they've had that. So we offer an informal mediation process, and that allows employees to discuss the issues raised and clear up misunderstandings. And it's been very successful. Moving on to employee and management services, you can see a laundry list of what this section is responsible for, including alcohol and drug testing, appeals, which are employees that have been dismissed, demoted, or suspended, employee evaluations, family and medical leave, leave and attendance issues, organizational climate studies, safety, whistleblowers, et cetera. And the 4 top things that we've dealt with are alcohol and drugs, FMLA, EAP, and grievances. Moving on to our governing body, the Personnel Commission. It consists of 5 members and 5 alternates appointed by the governor. The DHRM provides support to the Personnel Commission, and they're responsible for hearing classification appeals, appeals of not meeting minimum qualifications, and the approval of regulations that would then be approved by the Legislative Commission. Then we have the Employee Management Committee, who hears grievances of state employees. There's 3 representatives from management and 3 employee representatives, as well as their alternates. Once the Employee Management Committee has issued their decision, a party may request judicial review. We provide administrative support to that committee. There's a Committee on Catastrophic Leave, which hears employees, if they've been denied the use of catastrophic leave, this committee would hear that and make a determination. Workplace climate study program. This is where we, at the request of an agency, we'll go out and we survey employees, we meet with employees, we get their concerns, and then we develop a report for management to hopefully address those concerns that have been raised in an agency. This is, I believe, been a very successful program, and there is a wait list for agencies to use it. So central payroll and employee records, small slide, big responsibility. They issued in 2020 almost 500,000 paychecks. So if anything's going to get me in trouble, our division in trouble, that's when an employee misses their paycheck. So this small unit does a huge job. Compensation, classification, and recruitment section. The title of the section is obvious of what they do. They oversee compensation. That person does maintains the salary schedules for the state, conducts wage and benefit surveys, develops policies in compliance with state and federal requirements, and serves, participates in the Merit Award Board program, Good Government, Great Employees. Classification unit is responsible for classifying existing and new positions within the current classification plan, maintains that plan, and also conducts individual studies if there have been change in duties. Recruitment, the recruitment section is responsible for developing and managing recruitment strategies and processes, conducts job fairs, provide agencies with system training, it oversees the layoff process in the event they should occur, provide state training to employees, and gather statistics regarding layoffs. The total number of recruitments conducted in fiscal year 20 was almost 2,500, with applications received of a little over 66,000. That's a little below the average over the past 5 years, which has been at about 85,000. We have a veterans program that was brought on board, I think, 3 sessions ago, that is specific to veteran career counseling, job and application assistance, continued mentoring, connecting veterans with various programs throughout the state. We do have a peer mentor program where employees within the agencies serve as mentors to other veterans in that agency. We have an employee veteran of the month program, and we do have a mandatory interviewing program for veterans where agencies have to interview, if available on a hiring list, at least 22% of the veterans that are on the list. The agency human resource services section provides day-to-day full HR support to 45 state agencies. This includes onboarding, grievances, disciplinary actions, FMLA and ADA interpretation, anything that you can think of that would be in the normal personnel issues for the agencies that we serve. On page 21, you can see a list of agencies that Agency Human Resource Services sections serves, and they serve as that employee's HR shop. I mean, that agency's HR shop. There are no HR personnel within these agencies. The Labor Relations Unit, as a result of SB 135 that was enacted last session, the LRU was formed to operate as a single point of contact for complex interactions with unions and a new collective bargaining environment. As most of you are probably aware, prior to last session, the state did not have collective bargaining. The LRU is responsible for providing expert consultation to employees, employee representatives, agency representatives, and agency management in the area of collective bargaining, contract application, and negotiation delivery. So far, we formed the unit, developed a strategic plan, and began the process of hiring and developing a team of qualified labor relations employees. We develop collective bargaining agreement documents to support negotiations, including documents to support the state and future labor agreements. We've implemented negotiations on behalf of 7 bargaining units with 4 labor unions, and those are ongoing right now. We designed and launched the LRU website, the departmental survey, and contact cash. Developed curriculum for a 5-part series titled Leadership in a Collective Bargaining Environment to Support Change Management. And so far, we've trained and provided consultation to 746 leaders in 10 departments and 5 units on unfair labor practices and leading in a collective bargaining environment. The Office of Employee Development, our training section, is to provide competency-based training programs that help the state of Nevada develop and retain a highly qualified workforce. We have a team in Las Vegas and Carson City. The programs that we offer are the Nevada Certified Public Manager Program, the Management Academy, supervisory skills, general development classes, and special consultative services to agencies for learning and development projects. A little more detail on the management and supervisory programs we offer. The Certified Public Manager Program is a nationally accredited leadership program. This rolled out in 2004, and so far we've had 560 graduates from 41 agencies. As a part of the Certified Public Manager Program, in order to graduate, participants are required to put together a capstone project, and that's basically how could we do things better. And those projects so far since 2004 have resulted in $42 million savings to the state. So pretty significant. The Management Academy is a 5-month competency-based management development program. And we've had 10 classes since 2014 with 260 graduates. And the Supervisory Skills is a 42-hour practical application for 4,000 plus supervisors. And then general education. And what we recognized, what we'd known for a long time, but recognized that we needed to do something about was, in particular, the supervisory skills classes. People promote into supervisors from good journey level workers, and we weren't providing the training they needed to be good supervisors. And so that's what we're trying to do now, and I believe it's been a very successful. The next few slides are the agency budget. I just included in here for your overview. I know this is not your primary emphasis, but I did want to go over a couple things simply that we're asking for in this session as an enhancement. An increase of 5% for our payroll manager. For years, they're 1 grade above their closest subordinate, and typically in state service, we have a 2-grade differential. And then the collective bargaining assessment. This is a net zero cost, but we're reducing the assessment, the overall assessment, to all agencies, and moving that part to the labor relations section so that unit can be funded appropriately. So we're just taking from one bucket into another, but the bucket still holds the same amount. We eliminated a position in Las Vegas that we're able to do without, and we've reduced office space in Las Vegas to help with the budget situation. And finally, Senate Bill 51, which I'm sure I'll be presenting in front of this committee, is to, as I said, the Sexual Harassment Discrimination Investigation Unit has been in place since 2004. But that was Governor Gwynn that implemented that, but it's never been in statute. And although I think we've done a great job, every time, unfortunately, that there's a budget shortfall, we have to look at things that are statutorily mandated to keep, and things that aren't, we have to look at potentially reducing. And this bill was a result of not wanting to eliminate those positions or that responsibility, as well as Governor Sisolak in his first day in office put together the Sexual Harassment Discrimination Task Force, which included representatives from state agencies, including Department of Administration, the Attorney General's Office, the Equal Employment Opportunity Office, the university system, et cetera. And this bill is a result of the recommendations that came out of that task force. So that's my presentation. I appreciate the opportunity, and I would be more than happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Long. I'm impressed that you went through, what was it, 33 slides that quickly. I think that's probably a record here. Members, before we move into questions, I want to remind everybody that specifically regarding the last slide, Senate Bill 51, was it? Yeah, Senate Bill 51. We're going to have an opportunity to fully vet that bill during the presentation, to really dive into just any detailed questions you may have. So I ask that at this time, we focus on the broader conversation, and that we allow for questions specific to that bill to be reserved for whenever we have that presentation before this committee. With that, I do have some folk who have indicated now that they wish to speak and ask some questions. I'm going to take them in the order I've received them. And remember, if you have a question, if you could please send it to me via, or Vice Chair, via the chat. If we could start off with Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chair Flores. To you, through you, I guess, to Mr. Long. Quick question about one of the earliest slides, and it had to do with the number of employees that are unfilled. How many positions, and I understand if that's not off the top of your head based upon the employment things going on right now, but how many positions are not filled? And then is this due to the budget, due to other COVID-19 concerns, or due to qualifications of applicants?
Within our division, my division, I think we have about 7 or 8 positions that are unfilled. Mainly at this point was due to budget concerns and budget uncertainties, and trying to hold those until the governor's budget had come out and we kind of knew where we stood. So our intent is to fill those now. We've not had any significant issues with people meeting minimum qualifications or anything like that.
Thank you.
And Assembly members and Mr. Long, for everybody, feel free to go direct. No need to go through the chair. Next, if we could have Vice Chair Torres, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciate you taking the time this morning to join us. So I was just looking at slide 8, where we look at the complaints and the EEO complaints by investigation type. It seems that there's a large amount of racial discrimination and disability discrimination. So I was wondering, because you addressed that the investigation committee right now is predominantly meant to address gender discrimination, sexual harassment, but I was just wondering if there's been any measures to kind of address the other forms of discrimination that are prevalent.
Peter Long, for the record, sorry I didn't do that the first time. We do our best to address all of these, and hopefully the lower number means we are doing a decent job on addressing those. These are all included in our training and the different types of offenses that may occur under Title VII or state law. So we could take another look, but the training does include all of these various areas.
And if you may, Chair, if I could have a follow-up.
Please.
Thank you. So if you could just kind of walk through what that training currently looks like for state employees.
I'd be happy to get that to the committee. I don't want to say something off the top of my head that I may be wrong about. We will provide a full breakdown of what the training occurs to the committee secretary, what the training includes to the committee secretary for your review, if that's okay.
Perfect. And please do send that. Next, if we could go to Assemblywoman Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering how many positions are not currently coming into their office or are working from home?
Within my division, the majority of the positions are rotating. Senior management is here on a daily basis, but we've been fortunate enough to allow people to telecommute. So we have a minimal staff in the office, typically 5 to 10 people a day between the offices, so that they're able to do most of their work, if not all of their work, from their computers at home. And in order to ensure the safety of all staff, we have been implementing that telecommuting as much as possible.
Assemblywoman Black, I don't know if you had a follow-up.
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, if we could have Assemblywoman Durand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Long, for your presentation. Thank you, Chair, for the question. On the mediation process, you basically stated that you have like a win-win solution for trying to resolve at the lowest levels. Can you let me or tell this committee how many resolutions you've had with that committee being resolved on the lowest level possible? And what happens if it doesn't get resolved there? Does it go to the grievance process through maybe your process that you have on that?
Certainly. Peter Long for the record. If you'll allow me, I will provide that information to the committee. I don't have it off the top of my head how many mediations we've conducted, but I'll provide it for the last couple fiscal years, as well as the results of those mediations. If a mediation is not successful, the employee has the right to continue with the grievance process, which mediation can start at any level. I mean, the current grievance process starts with a grievance being filed with the supervisor, and then we go up to the manager, and then the department director, and ultimately the employee management committee. It kind of depends on which level the mediation is requested and implemented. So it could be at any of those levels, or it could actually start before a grievance is actually filed. And hopefully that is the case, so a grievance isn't filed. But ultimately, if mediation is unsuccessful, then the employee has the right to go all the way up to the employee management committee for a resolution. Hopefully that answers your question.
Follow up, Chair, please.
Please follow up.
So, for example, if the complaint is with their immediate supervisor, do you do anything to try to diffuse the situation by moving the employee to a different area? Or can you explain on how you did that? Because I know now with the collective bargaining agreements in full force, I'm not sure if yours, they cannot just bump into another position without being open, I'm sure.
Without the agreements have not been ratified yet. We're still working on them. So, but and without going into any detail, yes, there may be a separate grievance process through the collective bargaining, but we will still have state employees that aren't represented, or at least aren't represented yet, that would follow our current process. So, but yes, those would all be things that we would discuss as far as potentially, if it was possible, move an employee to a different section, move to a different supervisor. Everything is on the table, and then it's up to the employee and management to agree to that. So we try to pursue all possible options.
Thank you.
And if we can go back to Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you. And again, I'm sorry that I like questions. So very quick question. What form of bargaining are you using at this time? Is it are the rules all set out for the different groups, and is it consistent across all different units, or is that a a decision that is being made group by group. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. Peter Long for the record. Interest-based, but we set ground rules at the beginning. And, you know, there is some consistency, a fair amount of consistency across the various bargaining units, but obviously there are going to be differences between each bargaining unit. So, but basically, we started out with what's currently in effect in rules for personnel administration, and that's where we started. And so, current personnel rules.
Thank you.
And thank you for your questions, Assemblywoman. If we can go to Assemblywoman Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is actually with the stats for EEO. In 2019, you said the findings were 23, and in 2020, the findings were 17. My question is, with those findings, what was the solutions?
DHRM doesn't always know the resolution. We provide the report to the agency, and it's their responsibility to follow up on any disciplinary action that if they feel that's appropriate. And Chair Flores asked that we not get into great detail on SB 51, but part of that lack of knowledge of the end result by DHRM will hopefully be addressed in that bill.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And thank you for your question, Assemblywoman. It appears that you're hitting something there that they're trying to now to correct. So I think we're all on the same wavelength there. If we can go back to our
Get cut off, but I believe I was next. Thank you, Chair. And thank you once again. So just to change gears a little bit, I'm looking at slide 17, which focuses on the recruitment strategies, the recruitment through this department. And I was just wondering what strategies have been used or what effort has been made to recruit diverse applicants and what the diversity of the applicants look like. I see that about 66,000 applications were received last year, which is obviously an incredibly large number, but I'm just wondering what that diversity looks like. And you might not have that available, but I would definitely like to take a look at it later.
I would be happy to provide that to you if given the opportunity, yes.
Thank you. Members, do we have any additional questions? Seeing none at this time, Mr. Long, and for all presenters for today, and as we move forward, anytime we have a follow-up question, it's my intention to make sure that not just the particular member asking that question gets the info, but rather all members of the committee. So we ask that you please forward that either to our committee manager, Ms. Bishop, or Mr. Jared McDonald, and then they'll be sure to distribute that information to all members so that we all get that. Thank you, Mr. Long, for your presentation. Members, I appreciate you being attentive and asking questions. With that, we're going to go ahead and close out the presentation. And next, and thank you again, Mr. Long. Stay safe. Next, if we can go to the presentation from Purchasing Division, Broadcasting, please. Good morning.
Good morning.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Trying to get the Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Kevin Doty, Administrator for State Purchasing. I think I have the slides up on the screen. Cindy and the wonderful staff of LCB have helped me through this since I'm not very good with technology, but I think we'll get through this morning.
Mr. Doty, I just want to let you know that at this time, all we can see is your desktop, but not the slides themselves.
Okay.
Mr. Dottie, hi, this is Cindy with Broadcast. Okay, we are seeing your
There it
slides
is.
now.
You're seeing it now? Great. Thank you.
sir.
As I said, I am Kevin Doty, Administrator for State Purchasing, and we are a division of the Department of Administration, just like Human Resources who just presented. We are governed by NRS Chapter 333, which is where all the purchasing power for the executive branch of the state of Nevada resides. Basically, if it's a road project, NDOT handles it. If it's a construction project, then Public Works handles it. And Ward Patrick, the Administrator of Public Works, will be the next person to present this morning. Anything in between, anything not included as a road project or a construction project, that is handled by state purchasing. So whenever a state employee buys a box of pens, they're buying that box of pens from a contract that we put in place with Staples or some other company. Whenever Health and Human Services needs a managed care organization for Medicaid, a contract that's probably worth more than $1 billion, we put that contract in place as well. So it's both goods and services. We have 25 approved full-time positions, 22 are currently filled. As Peter Long, the Administrator of Human Resources, just said before me, there are almost 20,000 state of Nevada employees. Currently, the longest serving state of Nevada employee is Purchasing Officer Marty Marsh. Marty is in her 43rd year of service with the state of Nevada, which is very impressive, and we're very grateful for the work Marty does for us. Another important person in purchasing has been the Nevada Legislature. We have an online procurement system, NevadaEPro.com, and thankfully this committee and the Nevada Legislature in 2017 approved AB 480. That allowed purchasing to apply a 1% administrative fee to some of our contracts, and that funded an e-procurement system. Because of that e-procurement system, we've been able to continue to do our work even through the pandemic. We've been able to run RFPs, requests for proposals, and put in place contracts for important services. We've been able to purchase goods, including personal protective equipment, and we've run our solicitations all online with vendors who are registered online. That has made it possible for our employees to work mostly remotely, come into the office only when needed. And so I just wanted to say a special thank you to this committee and the Nevada Legislature for passing AB 480 in 2017, because that is what has enabled us to continue working as we've been working during these difficult times. Currently in Nevada ePro, we have more than 11,000 vendors or potential vendors registered. More than 2,700 of those are based in Nevada. We put a special effort into trying to find Nevada companies that could potentially do business with the state and try to get them signed up to our system, and so that they can bid on all of our contracts. And when applicable, we apply the 5% Nevada preference that was also approved by the 2017 Nevada Legislature. Our core responsibilities, procurement support, obviously, buying goods and services, managing all aspects of statewide contracts. These are contracts we put in place that are used by, this is a contract that isn't done for just one agency. It's something like the box of pens or computers or cell phone service or our temporary medical contract in the services side. It's something used by numerous state agencies. We also certify contract managers. We teach courses, and we've been able to do that online as well, and continue to train people in how to properly and ethically do state procurement. The State Surplus Property Program is another one of our responsibilities. When goods are no longer needed by state agencies, it is our responsibility to take care of those and hopefully get as much money for them as we can if we can't put them to use for another agency. State P card program, that's procurement cards These are the credit cards used by state employees to purchase things on behalf of the state. And we oversee the management of that program. And the first dollar value that I want to show in my presentation, because it's the one that I'm happiest about, is our preferred purchase program. We have a program that allows us to use a vendor that does work with people with disabilities, and we have Opportunity Village signed up as a vendor. So for fiscal year 20, we spent $2.3 million on janitorial services, shredding services, and other services with Opportunity Village. So this is probably some of the smartest money the state spends. We're getting important work done at a very good price, and the vendor who's doing it for us is doing important work themselves. To dive a little bit more into our numbers, whenever we do we need to put into place a contract for services. That's usually done through an RFP, a request for proposals. We put that together with an agency, and vendors submit the proposals, and we have evaluation committees review those and evaluate those and score those and award the contract to the highest scoring vendor. When an agency has a contract for more than $100,000, it's mandatory they go through state purchasing. For less than $100,000, they can do the RFP on their own. The same is true for an invitation to bid for a commodities purchase. If it's more than $50,000, state purchasing has to do it. Less than $50,000, the agency does it with oversight from state purchasing. And our numbers can vary through fiscal year, depending on what contracts come our way. Like I said, we're currently working on something for Medicaid that will be $1 billion contract, which would, distort our yearly numbers. If you notice, so far in fiscal year 21, under the invitation to bid for commodities, we've already purchased $133 million worth of commodities. Much of that is pandemic related. We've been buying personal protective equipment, masks, gowns for people. Also, commodities needed for vaccine distribution, such as needles and gloves and freezers to hold the vaccine, those types of things. So the commodities purchases are kind of ahead of schedule for this point in the year, but that's because we've had a lot of spending to do for the pandemic. To dive into some more of the numbers on our core responsibilities, these are the numbers for the number of people we've trained for our certified contract managers course. As you see, 245 so far this year. That's all online. The good of the state contracts, these are the contracts I mentioned that we put in place for use by all agencies. They can be called statewide or good of the state, sometimes referred to as a master service agreement. And we have quite a bit of spending on those. We like to see a lot of spending on those. It's important that when we notice that agencies are buying the same things, that we put that together on one contract and use the purchasing power, the combined purchasing power, to try to get the best price for the state. The P card program and travel cards, you see the fiscal year 20 spending there was $22 million, and we do get a rebate on those cards, and that was $310,000 in fiscal year 20. As you might imagine, the travel card portion of that has dropped to basically zero with the pandemic. I mentioned earlier the state surplus property program. We've continued to take in property that is unused by state agencies and distribute it to other agencies when we can. We have continued with holding auctions through our vendor that does the auctions. And in fiscal year 20, we returned $760,000 to state agencies through the auctions of excess state property. Our legislative initiatives for the upcoming session, AB 28 restores the inverse preference. It is that is something that was in Nevada law from 2003 to 2009. It's a way of trying to help Nevada vendors win more contract awards, and I can discuss that more when that bill comes before this committee as it will. And there is a BDR in the works that will do various things to our purchasing code to modernize it, including creating a debarred vendor list, which was recommended by the Executive Branch Audit Committee as a way to help better manage our vendors. And that's the presentation I have. I'm happy to answer questions.
And thank you, Mr. Doty, for that presentation. With that, we're going to open it up to members. And I believe Assemblywoman Anderson wanted to go first. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Doty, for all that information. I have so many questions, but I will only stick to one at this time. From slide 3, you talked about the different businesses, and the number of Nevada businesses seem to be a little bit low, or just a little bit off. So I was just wondering about your bidding process, especially when it comes to our smaller businesses, and our how are the priorities for the Nevada businesses utilized in the bidding process?
Thank you for the question, Kevin Doty, for the record. For the most part, we handle bigger solicitations and don't do many of the things that the small businesses would qualify for. We make an effort to try to get as many Nevada vendors registered as possible. Unfortunately, we can't legally just award to Nevada-based vendors as opposed to a vendor based in another state. That would be illegal. We do apply the 5% Nevada preference so that when it's close between a Nevada vendor and a non-Nevada vendor, hopefully that does move some awards to Nevada vendors. We have a vendor outreach person. The person we hired when that position became open a year ago, Ray Sanchez, is great. He's bilingual and used to serve in the Peace Corps, where he had experience teaching computer skills to people in the Dominican Republic. So he's a great person to act as a resource for Nevada vendors. And if you know of any Nevada-based vendors who are interested in doing business with the state, please send them our way. We're always happy to get them signed up into our system and provide them whatever assistance we can.
May I have a follow-up quickly, Mr. Chair?
Please, Assemblywoman, follow up.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Doty, for that answer. I can tell that you didn't like having to give it, and I can understand why. But I would just, so how long has that outreach for our smaller businesses? And I respect that the amount of things you're trying to buy is not always smart or best for the smaller businesses. But is it just the one person that's doing the outreach for our smaller businesses and our minority-owned businesses that are here in Nevada? It's only one person?
Kevin Doty, for the record, thank you for the question. In-state purchasing, we have one person getting people signed up. The real outreach comes from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. GoEd has people who do that for a living. And I know a few months ago, GoEd hired 2 people whose job is to help Nevada vendors get government contracts. So it's more of their full-time job to help Nevada vendors get contracts. We're in a position where we have to officially remain neutral in how we award contracts, but we're still very happy to sign up as many Nevada vendors as we can in the hopes that we can award to them.
Thank you.
And thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we have Assemblyman Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Doty, thank you so much for that presentation. I just had a question regarding the surplus property program. You note that in fiscal year 20, $760,000 returned to state agencies. I'm just wondering if this committee might be able to get a breakdown of that information based on an agency by agency basis.
Kevin Doty, for the record, thank you for the question, Assemblyman Matthews. I don't have the breakdown. I can ask the Governor's Finance Office for that. The Governor's Finance Office has the very difficult task of trying to assign that money back to the agency that had made the initial purchase of whatever it is we surplused. but I can ask for that information and provide it to the committee and see, where it came from and do the best we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next, if we could have Assemblyman Ellison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a question, and I think you kind of answered it, but we've got a lot of businesses that are struggling in Nevada right now. And is there a preferential that they give the people in Nevada, like some of the contracts, they give them a 1 to 5% bidding. But what about purchasing? We're trying to keep the people in Nevada working. So is there any way that they take them ahead of the people like, say, New York or wherever, California or wherever? So could you answer that?
Certainly. Kevin Doty for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Ellison. Legally, what we're allowed to do is grant a 5% preference to Nevada-based companies when we can. The federal government doesn't allow us to do that on contracts that are funded with federal funds. So that limits the application of that to a certain extent. But I know that Governor Sisolak has talked numerous times about it's a priority for him to get more business to Nevada businesses. That is why we try to sign as many up as possible and try to help them through the process. But legally, that 5% Nevada preference is all we can currently do. The legislation that I mentioned, AB 28, the inverse preference, it gets a little complicated, and I will explain how it works. And there's a lot of math involved. But what it basically does is in addition to a Nevada vendor getting a 5% preference, it would in effect penalize out-of-state vendors if they're receiving preferences in their home states. So if you have a situation where a Nevada vendor is going up against a California vendor, and let's say the state of California gives their vendor a 10% preference, what we would do in calculating an award on a contract is give the Nevada-based vendor 5% and penalize the California-based vendor 10%. And so if AB 28 is enacted, that should help result in a few more contracts being awarded to Nevada-based businesses.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Follow up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you tell us, do you have any idea how many vendors in the state of Nevada does get this preferential? I mean, I know if you're using government federal funds, that's an issue, but what about some of the state purchasing? Do we have any idea how many people qualify in the state for this? Is it at like 10%, 20%? Because what we want to do is we want to get these people back to work, and we want them to be able to hire. And there's a lot of companies in Nevada that is really good, but they're struggling. So could you give us an idea what the percentage is? And thank you.
Kevin Doty for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Ellison. As I put in my slide, we currently have 2,700 vendors in our system who have marked that they are Nevada-based. And based upon the terms of the 5% preference, which was enacted by the 2017 legislature, that is based upon a company's headquarters, because it's based on where a company's principal place of business is. And that's a principal place of business is a term of art that has been interpreted by the United States Supreme Court in terms of asserting personal jurisdiction over a corporation. And so we follow that same nerve center approach, and it's based on a company headquarters. So we have 2,700 potential vendors in our system that are based in Nevada. Unfortunately, I see many solicitations for things like highly specialized software that has healthcare or education applications where there simply aren't any Nevada-based vendors in that space who are bidding on those contracts. So a lot of what we buy goods and services wise, there aren't Nevada vendors for, and I wish there were. when there are Nevada-based vendors, we do what we can to get them into our system and help them through the process.
Allison, did you have a follow-up? I don't believe so. Oh, Assemblyman Allison, I think you're muted.
Okay, I'm sorry. I hit it twice. I was just thinking for the presentation, I thought it was good, and it's a lot of good information we could use going down in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblyman Allison. If next we can go to Assemblywoman Considine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Doty. I have a question on the minimum requirements for vendors. Is there any oversights or minimum requirements for, say, wages or working conditions for the vendors that are approved?
Kevin Doty, for the record, thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Considine. Yes, we are bound to follow Nevada law, which means that, of course, minimum wage is required for all our contracts. And it's a standard in all of our contracts that the vendor agrees to comply with all state and federal laws. And it is grounds for breach of a contract and us canceling the contract if they're ever not in compliance with state and federal laws. And if the debarred vendor proposal that will be coming presumably to this committee once that gets finalized is approved, that would also be grounds for debarring a vendor in the future, failure to comply with state and federal laws, including wage requirements, including discrimination and those sorts of things.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a quick follow-up?
Yes, please, follow up.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Doty. Are there any additional, points is probably the wrong word, but are any additional benefits if there are specific working conditions for any of the vendors, let's say that they are environmentally friendly or any additional things for any of those vendors that gives them a little bit extra?
Kevin Doty, for the record, thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Considine. We don't have anything currently in our law that gives a preference to a vendor based upon being environmentally friendly. We have provisions in our law regarding how we go out to bid for contracts, how we can favor environmentally friendly products. We can put in requirements that they be certain energy saver efficient. We can favor something we may be doing in the future. One of the contracts we put in place is buying vehicles for the state of Nevada. And as we replace vehicles in the state fleet, I imagine we currently have the option of electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles and have had those in our contract for years. But I imagine we will be doing more of that. But like I said, none of that's currently based upon a vendor and what they claim to be their environmentally friendly practices. It's based upon the products that we purchase from them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, if we could go to Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you once again for the presentation. I really do appreciate it. And I know that a number of my colleagues have touched base on their commitments to just getting hardworking Nevadans back to work. And I'm just wondering what tools and resources we're currently providing our vendors with so that they are individuals that are not yet, businesses that are not yet vendors, what tools and resources are currently being provided to the community so that they can learn the steps to the bidding process and becoming a vendor.
Kevin Doty, for the record, thank you for the question, Vice Chair Torres. I agree completely that that's where the emphasis should be. Like I said, legally, we're restrained in how we award the contracts. We can, provide the 5% Nevada preference, and that's pretty much it. But as far as getting people into the system and getting them registered and helping them draft good proposals and bids and that kind of thing, that is really where the state can do more. And that's why I was really happy to see that Go Ahead hired 2 people last fall to do exactly that. And I know some of what GoEd is doing in that respect. We work with GoEd and attending vendor fairs in the state. That's been a little restricted due to the pandemic. We've attended some virtual vendor fairs. And so we try to get people registered in our system. And anytime GoEd finds someone who we don't have in our system, we try to get them in there and help them through the process, which can be a little intimidating the first time to go through the process of trying to get awarded a government contract. Since it's the government, we understand there's going to be probably more red tape than you would experience in the private sector. And so we try to put extra effort in trying to help Nevada vendors negotiate that process.
And a follow-up, what, if any, outreach has been done specifically to Black and brown businesses or businesses where maybe the primary language is not English?
Kevin Doty for the record. Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Torres. Like I said, when we had our vendor outreach position we were able to fill a year ago, one of our considerations in hiring Ray Sanchez is that he is bilingual and that he can help us reach vendors that we haven't reached in the past. We've also made it an effort to work through GoEd with this, because this is really what they do for a living, and trying to reach communities that we haven't reached before. Like I said, it's a little bit difficult because when we do higher dollar value contracts, it's tougher for small businesses to apply for those, to qualify for those. And often one of the determining factors in a request for proposals is experience. So it is harder for new businesses to break in. So that's one of the things we've been working with GoEd on, is trying to get new businesses and from various communities to learn how to negotiate and navigate our system.
And thank you for your question, Madam Vice Chair. If we can go to Assemblywoman Martinez, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Doty, my question is, once these businesses put in for a bid, how long is the process for them to get a bid put in? Is it like a year? How long does it take?
Kevin Doty for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Martinez. It really varies. If we go out to bid for a simple commodity, we can go out to bid and award a week later. So that's very quick. If we do a request for proposal for a complicated service, like something in the healthcare space, that takes us, it can take a year to put the RFP together before we even release it and put it on the street. And then once we do, we have to give vendors a significant amount of time to respond, sometimes a couple of months to respond, because there's a lot that goes into their proposal at that point, and a lot for our evaluators to score. And so that process of from the time it's on the street to the time it's evaluated and eventually awarded can take several months. 6 to 9 months is not uncommon. And that also depends on how long it takes us to negotiate a contract with the vendor and finalize contract terms, because that's always the last thing that it takes some time.
Thank you.
Members, do we have any additional questions? I don't see it in the chat, but I want to make sure I'm not inadvertently overlooking somebody here by accident. I don't believe I see anybody else. Doty, thank you for your presentation. And members, I appreciate the spirit of your questions, the desire to make sure that we're getting more locally owned businesses to come into what could be a very intimidating and complex process of bidding for a government contract. But I think collectively we're all in the same place. We want to make sure that we're helping, educating, and encouraging local businesses to apply. Mr. Doty, thank you. And please, whatever questions you were not able to answer now, if you could send that information to our committee manager or analyst, and they'll be sure to send it out to all the members. With that, Mr. Doty, thank you again, and we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on the presentation from the purchasing division. And broadcasting, if we could next move on to the presentation for the State Public Works Division. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Chair Flores and members of the committee. I'm Ward Patrick, Administrator of the Public Works Division. Presenting with me is Kent Lefevre, Deputy Administrator for Professional Services, Rick Cabley, Deputy Administrator for Compliance and Code Enforcement. He's the building official of the state. Ron Cothran, Deputy Administrator of Buildings Grounds, and Brian Walker, our Chief of Planning. The Public Works Division consists of the Administrator, Buildings and Grounds Section, Code Enforcement Section, Professional Services Section, and the 7-member Board of State Public Works. Our Director is Laura Freed. We're governed by Nevada Revised Statutes Chapter 341, which is Public Works, and Nevada Revised Statutes Chapter 331, which is the Administration and Control of State Buildings, Grounds, and Properties. I'd like to discuss a little bit about the division's purpose, and that is summarized here and in more detail in NRS Chapter 341, Section 1405. The legislature has determined that what we do, which is planning, maintenance, and construction of public buildings, is a specialized field which requires a high degree of skill and experience. It involves the expenditure of large amounts of public money and involves public trust. The application by state agencies with conflicting standards or performance results in wasteful delays and increased costs. Therefore, planning, maintenance, and construction of buildings for the state shall be performed by the division. An introduction and overview of the presentation is as follows. Kent Lefevre will go over our vision, mission, and philosophy. He'll talk about our organizational chart and how we have 124 team members here at the division. Professional services has many attributes. Developing the capital improvement program, which is planning. Through project management, we implement the CIP. Project delivery methods are also known as the types of contracts that we issue. We will go over funding sources, and we will elaborate on extra efforts made to acquire grant funding. The facility condition analysis program has been documenting the condition of our buildings, state-owned buildings, since 1997. A narrative on the state building official duties will also be provided. An equally important part of the presentation is on buildings and grounds. Essential facility management, the state's leasing program, and the historic Marlette Lake water system will be discussed. This system is the only source of water to Virginia City since 1875. Kent Lefevre, our state's architect, will continue the presentation.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Chair Flores. For the record, my name is Kent Lefevre. I serve as the Deputy Administrator for Professional Services at the division. Our vision, mission, and philosophy are as follows. First, that state agencies will occupy exemplary facilities. I'll be showing a few examples of that throughout my presentation. Our mission is to provide well-planned, efficient, and safe facilities to state agencies so that they can effectively administer their programs. And our philosophy is that we work as a team to build consensus, we take pride in our work, and we serve with humility. Our organization chart is as follows. Under the Department of Administration, Our organization is led by Administrator Ward Patrick and our 7-member board. The building official section is led by Rick Cabley. The professional services section is led by myself, and buildings and grounds is led by Ron Cothran. Our support staff is led by Mickey Reed. In total, we have 124 full-time staff in the division. This slide is an image of the newly opened University of Nevada, Reno, William N. Pennington Engineering Building. This project was completed in August of 2020. The building was opened for students in the fall semester of 2020. This project is fast becoming a flagship of the engineering program at UNR. The characteristic red brick and steel capture the architectural vernacular of the campus. State Public Works was proud to add this structure to a long list of projects that not only meet the programmatic needs of the department, but are consistent with our vision, and that is that state agencies will occupy exemplary facilities. Now I would like to discuss the method used by the division to develop the capital improvement program, what we normally refer to as the CIP. First, we receive agency requests by April 1st of even-numbered years. Last spring, the division received over 900 initial requests. Second, the division staff members are assigned a host of projects to vet. Our division employs seasoned industry professionals, including architects, engineers, and other credentialed staff who oversee the day-to-day operations and implementation of the projects. Once the individual staff members have prepared a project estimate, they present their findings to a jury of peers to ensure project accuracy. Projects are reviewed by management and with the agencies as they prepare presentations to our board. Excuse me. The Public Works Board makes recommendation to the governor by the 1st of October of each evenly numbered year. And then our staff supports the governor's recommendation through the legislative session. This slide features the newly completed Department of Motor Vehicles in South Reno. This facility replaces the old DMV at Galletti Way with more room to serve customers from the greater Washoe County area. The building's architecture was patterned after the East Sahara facility in Las Vegas. The facility complements its surroundings with native materials like granite boulders that offer visual interest for customers. Our project managers follow a vigorous 143-step checklist from project inception to completion. This document ensures that steps are not missed and that statutes and industry best practices are followed. Projects are constantly tested to ensure that scope, budget, and schedule are maintained. This slide is image of the Speedway Readiness Center in North Las Vegas, and is another example of how buildings are designed both inside and out to express the needs of the agency while respecting the surroundings of its neighbors. This facility was completed in October of 2020 and now serves the National Guard. Our division coordinates with other state agencies and regulatory bodies through the course of a project's implementation. This is a highly coordinated effort to ensure that buildings are safe and ready to serve their intended purpose. Agencies that we coordinate with include the State Fire Marshal, the Department of Business and Industry, the Department of Health and Human Services, for example, culinary permits and healthcare facilities. The Nevada Department of Environmental Protection for wastewater permits and the like. The Division of State Lands and the State Historical Preservation Office. Here's another image, an artist's rendering of the proposed UNLV Engineering and Academic Research Building, which is in the governor's recommendation for this CIP session. The building will be situated on the UNLV campus between Ham Hall and the Thomas Bean Engineering buildings. The project will include wet and dry labs, maker space, and smart classrooms. This project is slated to begin shortly after the session concludes. The law allows for 3 different methods of delivering projects. First, and probably the most traditional method, is design, bid, build. This method is based on a low bid environment, and this method is appropriate for well-defined scopes of work. The second method is design, build. This method is a delivery process that places the contractor in control of the design and construction teams. An example of this method is the Richard H. Bryan building here in Carson City. The third method allowed by law is construction management at risk, or what we call CMAR. This method brings the contractor and the architect together in the beginning of a project in the earliest stages of design. The project delivery method is best suited for complicated projects like the engineering building that we just looked at. The division selects the best method to deliver a project based on project needs. And that brings me to CIP funding. Capital improvement projects are funded as follows: through general obligation bonds, highway funds, federal funds, and agency funds. This slide highlights several recent projects that have benefited from federal funding sources. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Administrator Patrick to discuss how the division actively pursues federal funding.
And thank you for your presentation. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. Next slide, please. I would like to discuss the special measures that the Public Works Division has taken to acquire grant funding. First, I'd like to give this Assembly Government Affairs credit for combining Public Works and Buildings and Grounds. Without the collaboration of the various sections of each, as soon will be highlighted, a nationally competitive grant has been received. Next, I would offer that the City of Reno has met with us to learn what special measures the division has implemented to acquire this grant and others like it. Also, Clark County has requested our grant application as an example of what FEMA is looking for. Brian, please roll back a slide. Draw your attention to Project 19C08 here, the Marlette Lake Dam Resilience Infrastructure Project. This project had a nationally competitive grant that FEMA has selected for Nevadans, $10 million of FEMA funding. Again, nationally competitive. The project below it is a project, Hobart Reservoir Dam, and this is a planning project, an advanced assistance project that we've received FEMA funds for. The division has applied for another $10 million on this grant for that Hobart Dam. We hope to learn the results of that application this spring here in 2021. Being awarded that planning grant awards application selection points for the next grant. So we're pretty hopeful in receiving that second FEMA grant. We proactively work with state agencies to identify opportunities. This is throughout the CIP planning process. We can go back and look at slide 8 if necessary about that process. We assemble grant procurement team. We determine each member's skills and duties for the application, and this is a fluid process to get the absolute best application in front of the federal reviewers. We conduct weekly meetings to discuss the plan for application of federal grants. The Emergency Management Division trains potential applicants that this is important, which they're pointing out that what the division has been doing is what creates success. We actively collaborate with using and regulatory agencies. We solicit early feedback and collaboration from reviewers. On both the Marlette and Hobart applications, FEMA visited the earthen dams and provided guidance. Developing these relationships is key to getting selected for these various competitive grants. Federal grant requests in the current CIP include for the Department of Administration, the Hobart Dam Rehab Project, approximately $10 million. For the Office of the Military, there's 22 projects in the current CIP for $40.7 million. Department of Veterans Services has 3 projects in the CIP for $6.4 million, and state parks projects, there's 3 of them, the total of $1.8 million of federal funding. So you can see we've got some fruits and some of the outcome of beating the bushes to get these projects to the Public Works Division. With that, I would turn it over to Brian Walker. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning. Good morning, committee members. For the record, my name is Brian Walker, and I'm the Chief of Planning for the Public Works Division. I'm going to present a brief overview of the Facility Condition Analysis Program, also known as the FCA program. The Facility Condition Analysis Program fulfills statutory requirements to inspect and assess state buildings. The program was initiated in 1997, and we have surveyed all of the buildings at least 3 times, except for new buildings. When a building is built, we wait 5 or 6 years before surveying because it typically does not require repairs when new. During an FCA survey, the necessary repairs are documented and then entered into a database back in the office. The findings include ADA recommendations, safety issues, and general repairs. All the projects are prioritized for decision makers to use. The database contains the building inventory, replacement costs of those buildings, and the recommended repairs. The information about the buildings is used for facility planning, which often includes guidance on whether to repair or replace any particular building. The FCA staff surveys over 2,300 buildings, which is approximately 10.3 million square feet in building area. These numbers do not include Nevada System of Higher Education buildings, Nevada Department of Transportation buildings, or the legislative buildings. If you include the buildings from those departments, the total would be approximately 4,000 buildings and 30 million square feet of building area. The Facility Condition Analysis Program estimates the replacement cost and repairs needed for each building. The replacement cost of the 10.3 million square feet is approximately $3 billion. Replacement costs are used by risk management for insurance purposes on these facilities. The repairs recommended in the FCA reports total approximately $514 million. It's important to keep in mind that the estimated repair costs are for planning level purposes only, and the actual project costs will vary from those generated by the FCA programs. With that, I'll turn it over to Rick Cabley to discuss the building official duties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, Chairman Flores and members of the committee. For the record, I am Rick Cabley, Deputy Administrator for Code Compliance and Enforcement and Building Official for the state of Nevada. Our authority for enforcement of the building codes adopted by the state legislature comes through NRS 341.145 and Section 2. Our section currently includes 18 members who work together to literally keep the ball rolling for construction projects up and down and across the state, north to south and east to west. Our collective works include these principal elements. First, the receipt and processing of building permit applications, plans for construction, and supporting submittal documents and application fees, all of which are processed through our electronic data management systems. The next vital step in our work is the review of all construction plans and submittals for code compliance and ultimately approval of those documents and the issuance of a building permit to the applicant. As a project progresses from into the construction phase, we respond to inspection requests that are submitted through a client portal to our permit management system and conduct those inspections as requested by the client. Inspectors further review and assess other works in progress at the site while they are there. In the cases where an inspector finds non-compliant work, that which does not comply with the codes, a notice of correction may be issued to the contractor. And finally, upon completion of the project, the building official, my office, issues a certificate of occupancy, or C of O as it's known, for new building construction, or a notice of final inspection for works within previously approved buildings. Our section has been working to move away from paper-based operating unit toward electronic processing for the past 3 fiscal years. As we have developed that capability, with the onset of COVID-19, we were able to fully implement that process. Such electronic processing of permits and inspections has saved the State Public Works Division and design professionals and our client agencies both time and money. Together as a team, we now provide 21st century services to our client agencies, contractors, and internal partners. Thank you for your time this morning. At this point, I will turn our presentation over to Mr. Ron Cothran, Deputy Administrator for Building and Grounds, who will present the diverse aspects of facilities management for our state physical assets. Ron, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Ron Cothran. I am the Deputy Administrator for the State Public Works Division, Buildings and Grounds Section. Buildings and Grounds Section, known as B&G, manages 1.8 million square feet of state-owned space. The B&G team is knowledgeable in energy conservation, code compliance, and safety. The B&G team oversees and performs heating, ventilation, air conditioning, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, painting, grounds maintenance, and custodial services. The B&G team manages state assets in the Capitol Complex in Carson City and some buildings in Las Vegas and Reno, to include the State Capitol, the Governor's Mansion, the Grant Sawyer, and the DMVs. Maximal is B&G's work order system. It holds the equipment data and automatically generates work orders to let the team know when to conduct preventative maintenance, and equipment replacement. By performing preventative maintenance on equipment, the B&G team can save energy and prevent premature failure. Leasing Services oversees 329 leases to include all state agencies with the exception of higher education, the Supreme Court, and legislature. They manage 1.8 million square feet of state-owned space and 2.1 million square feet of non-state-owned space. Leasing Services fulfills the requirements in NRS 331-110. They locate new space for state agencies. They inspect lease facilities. They negotiate and manage the rates, the term of the lease, the tenant improvements, and they prepare the lease contracts. This is a picture of the Marlet Lake located at 7,800 feet in elevation. The statutory authority for the Marlet Lake water system is NRS 331-160 through 331-180. The Marlet Lake water system is a historical system constructed in the mid-1870s. The state purchased the system in 1963 from the Curtis Wright Corporation at a cost of $1.6 million. This slide has two historic pictures. On the left is the Marlet Lake, and on the right is the flume that transported water. The system is funded by raw water sales purchased from Story County and Carson City. Additionally, the system receives funding and project management through the CIP and federal grants where applicable. This slide is a picture of the solar bee located in Hobart that breaks down the turbidity and improves the water quality. These are pictures of the Lakeview tank site located at 7,100 feet in elevation. This slide shows the Marlet Lake water system's prior CIP projects dated from 2008 to 2017. As you can see from the previous slide, there has been an increase in the current and recommended CIP projects. In FY19, the approved CIP projects were the Marlet Lake Dam Rehab, the Marlet Generator and Controls Replacement, pump modifications, and the Hobart Dam Advanced Planning. In FY21, the recommended CIP projects are the Hobart Dam Rehab and the Diversion Dam Controls Replacement. Future needs for the system is master planning that will include the capital, operating, SCADA, and a rate study, upgrading the East Slope catchment, replacement of the main generator, and upgrading the transmission lines on Sawmill and East Slope. I would like to thank you for your time this morning. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you all again for your presentation. With that, members, questions. I don't see anybody in the chat, but I want to make sure that I give everybody an opportunity should there be somebody wishing to ask a question. I don't think we have any questions at this time.
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, who is that?
Assemblyman Ellison.
Oh, thank you, Assemblyman. Please, if we could go to Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think for the presentation, I've seen a lot of this before, but one of the questions I had, and I had before also, we've got a lot of public lands out there in buildings that are just sitting there. Why isn't some of these buildings set up for disposal and sale to create businesses to grow? And instead of just sitting there, we should be moving these buildings to help some of these smaller industries or private businesses to get started moving on. Can somebody answer this? And how much do we have out there that could actually be gone for disposal? I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ward Patrick, for the record. Thank you. What the question, as I understand it, is do we have any vacant buildings that have been vacant long-term or even medium-term, which is not including some of the reduced capacities for the COVID pandemic? And so buildings and grounds in this division, we supervise that 1.8 million square feet. And largely the buildings that are unoccupied are those that are historic in nature and are being held in a state of arrested decay and do not meet the needs of the state. And so some of those buildings include part of the former Stewart Indian School. There's approximately 300,000 square feet out there, of which the state is occupying the larger buildings and the ones that are more sound and suitable. And so of those 300,000 square feet, about approximately 200,000 is being utilized out there. And so the structural conditions are inhibiting the use of some of the other buildings. Also unoccupied within the division is the old children's home. This is on Fifth Street, across the street from the legislative warehouse building. And so these buildings were funded for demolition back in 2007, and that was removed due to the budgetary issues from the CIP then. And so those those buildings are under consideration for demolition. Another building in southern Nevada is the Bradley building. It's the Bradley building down on East Sahara. And so that's approximately 30,000 square foot building. And it is, I think it was built in the 1950s. And this building would require significant structural upgrades in order to be brought back into use. And so we have very few vacancies in the other buildings. And the mantra for operations in our program is that we fill state-owned buildings first. So as Ron mentioned, there's 329 active leases, and these are continuing to come up. There's usually 3 to 5 to even 10 leases on the BOE agenda. And when we, before we enact a new lease, we look for those spaces in our state-owned space. And so we see that the amount of lease space is decreasing because we are maintaining the use of state-owned space. I hope that answers your questions.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Please follow up.
Okay, I know that the state public works had a lot of public land, little lots all over the place down by Clark County. I don't know if they still do or not, but it seemed like to me, if you got buildings that's set for disposal, why don't you put that out to the public and allow the public to tear them down or remodel or whatever? But it's better to get the tax roll back on the state's money than it is to let them set. So I just think it'd be pro-business to get rid of some of these and let's get tax dollars off of them and get them back into the state. And also that helps the counties, where they're ever at. So I just hope you guys would consider that. If I had a bill available, I'd put one in for that, but I don't. So I hope somebody will do that in the future because, you want businesses and state to grow, get rid of some of this stuff. It's just sitting there. And if they got to be tore down, you'd be surprised what private industries can do to remodel a building and get it up and make it profitable. So I just hope that somebody will look at that in the future. Thank you very much.
And members, any additional questions? I know that Assemblywoman Anderson may have had a question, but I don't know if you wanted to hold on that. If you could please clarify.
Thank you. I was going to ask about some safety measures, but I have a feeling that that's going to be used at a different time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Members, any additional questions? I don't believe we have any additional questions at this time, but if I'm overlooking you, please feel free to unmute yourself at this time. Seeing none, members, thank you for your questions and thank you for the presentation. I'm sure folk will reach out as questions arise during the session. With that, I'd like to close out the hearing from the State Public Works Division. Members, I want to remind all of you to give yourselves an opportunity to familiarize yourself with all the folk that are going to be presenting before you, and that you consistently give yourself an opportunity to reach out to them, use them as a resource. They have an abundance of information they can share, institutional knowledge, and can explain why certain things have been for a certain way for so long. At this time, I'd like to go to public comment. Broadcasting, do we have anybody waiting for public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you, Broadcasting. With that, members, before we adjourn, does anybody have any final thoughts, questions? Seeing none, we'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you all for your insightful questions and this productive meeting for today. Congratulations to our new elected members who had an opportunity to ask the very first question. Again, thank you all for your attentiveness, and I'll see you back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.